Hi, my name is Rachel, and on this mini-sago episode, I am going to be showing you my empanada folding process. And while I do that, I am going to talk about some of my blind spots that I've become increasingly more aware of as a Filipinx-American. And so I'm just going to be talking about that while I start folding these empanadas, because I have a whole batch going for this week and need to stuff them. First off, I'll say thank you so much for supporting me, and I'm really grateful for it and would appreciate if you can subscribe to my channel. It really helps me and helps this channel grow, so I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so here is my empanada dough. I already have the dough pre-made and then cut out, but lately I've been making my empanada dough with ground annatto seeds so that it brings this orange color. I have seen, and I really want to try the empanadas from Ilocos Sur that also have achote powder in the dough. I'm not going to be making those empanadas. They have grated papaya, an egg, I think longanisa too. And so I know I've never tried it, but I have been adding the annatto powder to my dough recently. And I feel like it's more just an aesthetic thing. I like how it looks. I'm just going to really non-scientifically add my filling. I try to put less than I think that I'm going to need because I really don't want to cause them to burst open accidentally or to overstuff them and then I can't close them. So I'm just gonna be doing this. And I also had these in the fridge before starting this so that they are really cold, and I keep the dough just really cold because that helps them keep their shape and also not lose too much butter when they're baking. Okay, and then I'm gonna need also some water because I usually put water around the edges to make sure that the edges seal together. So I'll go grab that. Maybe I'll go get that now. Okay, now I have my water. And also the filling, I like to make sure, and it's really tough if you're on time constraint, but I like to make sure that the filling is not hot. Usually I'm cooking the filling on the same day, and so I just need to make sure that it cools, so I'll just shove it in the fridge and make sure that it is not too hot when I'm filling the empanadas. Okay, I'm just filling my last one. And then we can start folding. Here is my empanada. It's not too filled. I could probably put more, but I really just like to put less than to be safe. So this is maybe about a tablespoon of filling. And then I like to grab the edges here. I know a lot of people do this really differently, but this is just what works for me. And here, let me go ahead and put a little bit of water. Okay. So now I'll grab the edges together like this, and I'll pinch them together, and I'll try to make sure that there's no air and that it's really tight on the filling. So I don't know if you can see, but I'm just pinching it. And then, yeah, once the edges are together, then you can start doing the little crimping, and this just comes, I think, with practice, and mine are still not perfect, but I just do a little fold, another little fold, another fold, and then press it, just pinch it together and press it, and then go all the way around the empanada, and then that's it. And look, it's so cute, so tiny. These are mini empanadas, but I really like these for breakfast because I'll just eat a bunch of them. I really like making empanadas ahead of time. It's a nice weekend task. It's really nice to just kind of sit and think while I'm doing this, and then I can freeze a bunch of them and then we can eat them. I like to say for weeks, but usually we're done with them in a week. So yeah, we have a toaster oven and we just reheat them in the toaster oven, and they are super good for any time of day. And something that's nice too about making empanadas is that you can pretty much stuff them with anything. So I've stuffed empanadas with like leftover caldereta, pretty much you can use any stew as long as you just remove most of the liquid. It's a really nice way to avoid throwing away leftovers and pretty much make certain that they'll be super yummy when you stuff them into an empanada. So it like gives it new life. So I said that I was going to just kind of talk more casually about things that I've come to find have really been blind spots in my knowledge. And these are things that I just have found that I haven't really had to think about them because of my own experience. So your experience might be really different. So I'm really just going to only speak for myself. And I try to learn as much as I can, but it's hard sometimes, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. So in general, try to like learn as much as we can and reveal what those blind spots are. But there are going to be things that you just haven't had to think about, and we just have to try to learn what they are. And so the first blind spot that I've had as a Filipino-American is not realizing the predominance of Tagalog over other languages spoken in the Philippines. My parents, just personally, do speak Tagalog, and I didn't have very many titas are like family friends or anything so I didn't really think about that. I just thought, I don't know how to speak Tagalog. And finally, I'm starting to learn Tagalog. But what I didn't realize was that, it's hard enough being able to find resources to learn Tagalog, but it's even harder. And this is really sad. It's even harder to find resources to learn Visayan, to learn Ilocano. That's really tough because I know like I already feel disconnected from not being able to speak Tagalog, but at least I have ways to learn it. With other languages, it's tough because that is just like an increased likelihood that the language can go away over time. And so it's even more important that we find ways to preserve language and culture. And that's just things that I've never really had to think about, is the danger of Tagalog completely going away or not having any way to learn it. And so that's really been a blind spot for me. And even more broadly than that is just the realization, I knew it, but you just don't think about it all the time, is that we have one nation state in the Philippines that comprises over 7,000 islands. And so, I don't know, countries are like, or nations really are so strange and dilute a lot of culture, or at least the way that we perceive culture. And so for me to kind of like not really think about the fact that there are so many languages spoken in the islands that are the Philippines, it manifests in ways that I haven't really had to think about. It really makes me appreciate the resources that I have to be able to learn Tagalog, but it makes me realize that the resources available for learning other languages are even more sparse than Tagalog. Okay, so I finished one tray. I'm gonna go get a few more rounds. So I got more rounds in the fridge, and I actually put the other empanadas in the fridge to cool because I've been holding them with my hands a lot. I want to make sure that I'm keeping the pastry cool. And so the second blind spot that I have as, just like ignorant Filipino American is Indigenous people of the Philippines that live in the nation state that we call the Philippines. I do not have immediate family members who are IPs or Indigenous people in the Philippines. And so I really haven't had to think about the unique experience and struggle of being an Indigenous person. And more recently, I've tried to learn a lot more about what Indigenous people in the Philippines right now are experiencing. Many of them are fighting on a daily basis to preserve things like their way of education, their schools, and their land, and they're constantly under attack and threat. And because I don't have Indigenous people in my immediate family, I didn't really think about it and think about what are their unique experiences and what do they have to struggle with and think about every day that I never have to think about. A lot of times the way that we talk about Indigenous people makes it seem like they are in the past, and that's really harmful because it erases, you know, what they're experiencing now, and it makes people think that, you know, these things only happened in our past. For example, in my mini pies video where I made buko pie and egg pie, I talked about the American teachers that got on a boat and went to the Philippines in the early 1900s when the Philippines first became a US colony. And it is very saddening to think about, like, American teachers coming there, like, they're trying to basically set up the American school system in the Philippines and control what children in the Philippines are learning. Yet if you compare that to right now, and think about the nation state of the Philippines doing similar things to Indigenous people of the Philippines, closing their schools, putting their people under attack. I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but there are parallels to these things that have happened in the past. I think something like nearly 100 schools run by Indigenous people in the Philippines have been closed during the current administration. I used to be really drawn to textiles that are made by Indigenous people in the Philippines, and they would really draw my attention because my ignorance just made me think, oh, you know, these textiles are so beautiful, and if I wore them, then I would feel more Filipino. I don't have any, but have recently been more in the realization that, you know, a lot of these textiles are sacred, and a lot of them are, even though they are made by Indigenous people, the copy that you are getting is not made by an Indigenous person, and they're not receiving payment or credit for that textile. And that is, you know, very harmful. It's made me think twice about why do I feel like I need certain things to feel more Filipino when it might be for taking something from another culture that is really not mine. Okay, and the last blind spot that I'm going to talk about, I have many more blind spots than that, but the third one I'm going to talk about is the work of activists who are Filipinx in America. This is something I really, really, really wish was more in our curriculum. I didn't learn about Larry Itliong until way past college. And I really wish that in my K-12 education, when we were learning about labor movements, which I really mostly only learned about in my Spanish class, that we learned about the Filipinx that were part of that too, and the Filipinos that were part of that. And so I never learned these things and was blind to them until I took it upon myself to learn. And I think that it is really important for people to see themselves in activists. I know that you shouldn't have to have that experience in order to feel that you should care too. But I think that it just is really different when you learn about the struggles of Filipino farm workers, or the struggles of Filipinx that were working in Alaska at the canneries and not receiving adequate working conditions or pay. I think for me, once I found out that Filipinos were a significant part of the labor rights movement, that they had founded the first canneries unions in Alaska, it helped awaken me to the fact that, hey, Filipinos and Filipinx have been in this country for multiple generations, and they've been doing work. And so it makes me think about, like, what is our legacy that we want to leave in our generation, and to continue the work that people before us have been doing. And I think that that is really, really meaningful and something to feel connected to as a Filipino or Filipinx-American. And it's something that I didn't really learn about, and I really wish that I had earlier. All right, so I finished up all of my empanadas. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so that you can stay plugged in with the next episode of the Sago Show. Salamat!